the Art Discovery Series, Metal Mania. This is going to be fun. So I'm excited about this one. And I had, last May, we were in New York City and we went to the Rockefeller Plaza Tower. And I was intrigued by how they built it. And my husband's father and my stepdad were in the steel industry, and I thought, you know, metal and steel is such an industrial thing, but there's something alluring about it that made each of these panel members want to create art out of metal, which I think is really kind of cool, that it can be both utilitarian and decorative. So it's going to be a good panel. So I'm going to introduce just from left to right, and then I'll have each of you tell a bit about yourself. But to your left is Michael Jones from Big Fork, Montana. And many of you are Michael fans. And then right next to him we have Sherry Meldrum from right here in Cave Creek, where I bet you had snow last night. Yeah. And then right here we have Carlos Page, who lives between here and New Jersey. Originally from Argentina. So you have to listen carefully when Carlos talks. And then right next to me from Colorado is Elizabeth Haight. So they know the rules. We've got to talk with the microphone right here, especially because we have a heater on. Doesn't it feel great in here? Yeah. This is the place to be. So I think we'll just start left to right, and I'm going to ask each of you just to tell us a little bit about you, how long you've been with the celebration, and how long you've been working artist.
Thank you. Yeah. So I've been in the celebration. This is my 21st year. Yeah. How does 20 years go by? It's amazing. It's amazing. I've always been drawn to metal. I started out in metal at high school age, and it just, I guess the thing that still just floors me about metal is the longevity. It's going to be here for long past all of our lifetimes. So that's a good thing. Yeah.
Hi. Okay, so this is my 16th year at the celebration. Yay! And let's see, what drew me to metal? I think I've worked in so many different mediums over the years, but when I moved to Arizona and saw this rusty metal, I sort of got intrigued by it and started out welding steel, and then discovered copper and never really looked back, because you can do so many great things with copper that, you know, other metals won't turn blue and green. And yeah, and the longevity of it. People ask me, well, how long will this last? And I said, probably longer than we'll be alive. So, yeah.
And copper is one of the 5 C's of Arizona.
That's right. Cactus, cotton, copper, citrus, and what was the other one? Climate.
Just like today.
So copper right there.
This is my 8th season at Celebration, and I got started, I got interested in steel also in high school. I had a metal shop. I went to technical school, and it intrigued me, and from the very beginning. Then I came to States, went to San Francisco to apprentice with an Argentinian artist there, and he worked with steel, and that kind of completed the picture for me. One of the things I love about steel is how transcendent has been in the development of our civilization. It's like our cities, our roads, our ships are made of steel, and that fascinates me and makes sense when I go into the studio to have that in mind.
Hello, I'm Elizabeth Haight, and I live in Erie. I started, Colorado, sorry. I was a college dropout. Hey. You know, mother knows best, right? This is a mother's knows best story. My mom told me, why don't you try jewelry? And I had been an art student. I thought that art was painting and sculpture and nothing else was art. I was an art snob. I went to a, just a regular college in the art program. And I was like, jewelry? No. But then, fast forward many years as a college dropout, she said, well, take a class this summer at this art school, I'll pay for it. And I'd never done anything with metal. And I took a jewelry class, and the first day I did it, I was like, boom, that's me. And I've been making jewelry ever since. It'll be half my life this year, 26 years.
That is awesome. So in the description for today, we talked about metal from large scale, which definitely we're going to have Michael Jones cover, all the way down to small scale, and how you can manipulate it to be anything you want it to be. And I think a lot of people might be interested in how do you take a raw piece of steel or metal and turn it into art. And each of you do something so unique. And if we just kind of go down the line, Michael, you really started off with much more of the kind of Native American inspired, and you've segued into this beautiful contemporary that can really go with anything. So just a little bit about how do you get the material to do what it does, or make it do what you want it to, maybe is more accurate. And then I'd love to have Sherry talk a little bit about your weaving. We'll just go down the row, and I'll make sure, starting from the far left is a Michael Jones swirl.
Yeah, so it's one of the things about metal. It's the manipulation of it. There's no question you can do a lot with it, but it's always going to have a mind of its own, always. And which is one of the things that I'm passionate about that. So I'm going to stand up and I'll talk about this piece. So for me, what I want to do is metal is considered to be a hard and a cold medium. So that just challenges me. I want to give it light. I want to give it energy. I want to give it movement. That's what it's about. So everything that I do here, I'm kind of an old school guy. So it's all by hand. There's no plasmas, lasers, technology. I don't even know what's out there. This is pretty basic. Oxyacetylene torch and forge and welding and grinding and sweating. That's how it gets done. So if you look at this piece, it's something that I have evolved to. Susan mentioned that I was very involved with a lot of prehistoric art early in my career because it just fascinated me and still does. And it's interesting how I've got to travel quite a bit of the world to look at different prehistoric art, and no matter, here's what I love about it. No matter how contemporary you think you might be, and if it's two lines, it was done prehistoric. And so I'm always intrigued by that. So that leads on to, I've always been inspired by my surroundings, being in Montana. So a lot of, I'm the guy that wakes up in the middle of the night and the brain kicks on. So you always get inspired. I look out the mountains and I have a mountain scene out in the courtyard, which, thank you, sunshine. We love that. So I'm inspired by a lot of my surroundings or organic things, and that's what these really do represent, very organic. To me, that they were inspired by grasses, and I call them like dancing reeds. But all the texture that you see that I do this, it's all about light. This body of work has so many different surfaces that it's always changing, and it's not only the lights, but it's the shadows as well. And so that's what it's about. I want to have that light. I want to have that movement. I want to take that steel and I want it to be alive, and movement in the wind as well. So there's always, steel is one of those mediums that you can defy gravity, and there's a lot of them that you don't have. As hard and as cold as steel is, it still does have elasticity, so it will still move. And so that's kind of what that's about.
How do you get it to swirl?
Oh, I didn't even talk about that. Sweat. No. So, which is true. talking about being old school, this is all twisted by hand. So there's no machines, there's nothing involved. So each one of these reeds, I weld a 4-foot handle on, so individually. I have an oven that I built. That oven opening is small, it's only 4 by 6, but it's very deep, and I have 2 heat sources. These go into my oven individually. I can't get them red hot, but I get them hot, and then they come out, and my apprentice and I, who is my nephew, to start twisting on it. And you do pretty good. You get a revolution, you think, yeah, I got this, right? And you're cranking on it, and all of a sudden it kind of sucks you over and down, and all of a sudden it throws you back 2 feet because you've created a spring. You've changed the molecular structure of that steel. So, and it's a one-time thing. You heat it up once and you twist it once. That's all you get. So that's why you get the variations. I try to twist these as a unit, meaning I'm not twisting a bunch of other stuff because maybe one day that the oven's working good, maybe one day you're just whipped, you know. So you never know. But there seems to be a consistency in them if you get to. I mean, what I should say is I think they flow together better to do it that way.
All right, Miss Sherry, let's hear about how you get your beautiful textures.
Okay, well, I believe in technology, unlike Michael. I'm all for it. And I like using tools like plasma cutters and electric shears and things that help me cut the metal into the shapes that I want. So copper, like metal, is very unpredictable, which is a challenge for a little control freak like me. But that's also the challenge and the fun part of it. These are all pieces of copper that I've patinaed, and what I use are different acid combinations that I apply to the copper. The copper reacts and changes color. And then once I have that done, then I cut it into strips using my handy dandy Black & Decker shears and create the weavings. So I'll pass this little weaving around that you can all take a look at. And then I recently found a way to, I love what copper does and the blues and greens, but I wanted to broaden my palette. So I found a way to add enamel in with the combination of the chemicals that I'm using. So now I can get purples and reds and colors that you don't normally get with the patinas in copper, which now I can say any size, any color, which I love being able to say. And most of these I wire to hang either direction. So I think that the randomness of the weave pattern creates movement and creates also a lot of the texture.
Very good. And also, I'm going to mention that your husband, Ralph.
Oh yeah, him.
Yeah. They have separate work areas, I think, which is always a secret to a happy partnership.
My husband, Ralph, and I do this together. If you walk into my studio, which is right there, you'll see the copper wall sculptures where we do use plasma cutters and different technologies to create pieces. My husband, Ralph, does the wall sculptures. I do the weavings. I do all of the patinas. We have separate studios so we can stay married, but it works really well for us. He has that technology background that I'm sort of lacking, so it works out. We're a great partnership.
We one time had a couples panel, and I think all of them had the secret was separate studios. Yeah,
Separate studios, that's the secret.
Okay, so Carlos, I'm going to move out of the way a little bit, and we'd love for you to talk about, Carlos works with steel, concrete, wood, creating fascinating combinations. So tell us about your technique.
Well, in this bench is one of the hardest one for me to make because I kind of go back to the old school and old-fashioned blacksmithing work. For the curving of his legs, I use a torch to hit the steel wheel and a hammer and an anvil. So everything else is a grip, hand, guided which, as Michael pointed out before, it's still always, in many cases, wants to do its own thing. Especially these have been out of angle iron, which is hardest in the middle. So when I bend the steel, because I do it kind of primitively, just using the torch to heat it, it's not perfectly heated all across. So the angle tends to go sideways or twist. So I usually make these benches. I'm bending some legs here at my booth at the show, weather permitting, during the week. But I usually make one of these when I'm coming back from a break or from a trip, or just because it forces me to focus immediately and pay attention to what I'm doing. So it's kind of an exercise in discipline. That's part of the allures of material for me. It's, this being a signature bench, I've made a number of them over the last few years, but the challenge is always fresh. I have to start all over again. So that's the basic shape. They're all different too, because the only way for me to make them the same, as you can see the 4 legs, is to make the legs together. So I go bending them together to keep track of where they are at any given stage. Once I'm finished, even if I use the same drawing on my table, and use the same materials, they will never be the same. The top of the bench is concrete, which in this case I use a blue pigment to color. And you can see there the print on egg, play with the texture, and concrete, as I mentioned before, is part of it's another material I've been using quite a bit and for quite a long time, because it incorporates part of what I was saying, fascinating to me about steel, which is how important it's been for, in our cities and our buildings and everything. So that's always nice.
Can you talk about, is this hand done with a torch, the circle?
Yeah, basically I use a torch. I'm very primitive. If you come to my studio and get a grip, I use very few tools, but I use them a lot. So I have an old stick welder, which is pretty much obsolete for everybody else, but it works for me. And then I have a torch and the anvil and some grinders, and pretty much that sums it up. But so all the cuts they see and the designs in my work come mostly from the torch.
And then the grinding?
And then tons of grinding to soften all the edges. Steel is a very sharp material, so to make it safe for everybody to touch, the only way to get there is through lots of grinding.
Yeah. So one of the reasons we don't really see Michael and Carlos doing a lot of that torch work here is it's really hot. And you got to wear your protective everything. I mean, you all do to some degree, yeah.
Say yes.
And just like our glass artists, some of you had gloves that have caught on fire, right?
Yeah, well, that's something that Michael mentioned as well. The fact that steel is as hard of a material as you can get. That's why they use them, building skyscrapers. But with the torch, with fire, it becomes very malleable, and that's beautiful. You can see both pieces and a lot of our work. And but then once it hardens again, it's again as precious as it was before you heat it up. So it's a very noble material to work with. It just responds quite well, and you can make things like that forever,
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so Miss Elizabeth.
I'm still on here. Okay. So now what am I supposed to talk about? Materials?
Yeah, how do you do it?
Okay.
I'm gonna make sure everybody can see this.
Oh, okay.
And put it right there. And then if you want me to pass any of your tools around, and
Yeah, I just wanted to show, just that I don't use a whole lot of really fancy stuff. Yeah, like most of everything I do, this is a jewelry saw. And like I tell my beginning students, this blade is really small, but it's going to be, if you cut your finger with this, it's like the worst paper cut you could ever get. Don't cut yourself with that saw. And then I use like scissors. They're metal scissors they cut. Also, recently cut my finger with that. And yeah, just simple stuff, files. And then I use a thing like your dentist uses on your teeth, except for it's made for jewelry, and pliers. And that's how I make most of my jewelry. Because, oh, it's closer, sorry. This is kind of off topic, but I just thought it was really neat that all of us work in metal and all of us said the same exact thing. Michael, you said about movement. Sherry said movement. You didn't say movement, but if you were talking about it, you know, this is implied movement. And if you look at my statement and like the piece that Susan is wearing for me, my statement has in it implied movement. So that's kind of neat because it is, metal is cold. You know, if you touched it today, right now, it's cold. But when you manipulate it, if you can give it a life, that's pretty cool. Or not cool. But what's the other thing we were supposed to talk about? Oh yeah. Yeah, so pretty much all these shapes I just created with my scissors and pliers. And then everything is soldered. And then these are just actually pieces of wire that I cut them into the shapes that like to fit into that space. And then I heat them up with a torch and they like basically fuse. So I don't have to solder each one of those things. So then I make all my parts separate and then solder them all together at the end. And then gold, I always solder last. And stones you set after everything else is done. The last thing you do is set the stone.
So the difference between the torch and soldering?
Okay, yeah, so I do basically the same thing these guys do with on a bigger scale with a torch. They use bigger torches, but you have to heat the metal to a certain temperature to get the solder to flow. Solder for jewelry is made out of the same metal that you're soldering, but it then also has tin in it, so it has a lower melting temperature. So you learn that really quick when you're a beginner, that you don't want to melt the whole thing. You just want to melt the solder, and then you have your pieces, you heat it up to the right temperature, and you can see that solder just go all the way around. It's pretty cool.
I think this would be a great question for all of you. Do you sketch out your designs first, or do you freestyle as you go?
Yeah, and I kind of wanted to bring a piece, a drawing. Sometimes my pieces are a drawing. I just do a drawing. I do real loose drawings like that, and then the piece looks almost exactly like the drawing. And then other times, like those earrings over there, I had a bunch of those shapes, and I wasn't really sure how I wanted these earrings to go together, so I just sat there and played with shapes, and I was like, that's what I'm going to do. So it does vary from piece to piece.
And in your case, do you always have the stones picked out ahead of time?
Yeah, normally before I will solder anything completely in place, I will pick the stone because that makes the shape and size that I do. So I couldn't have used a bigger stone here if I'd already had those little pieces soldered there. I try to add everything kind of like, I like little smaller things nestled in, so they have to be exactly the right size.
And I love that these are mismatched, but they're absolute pair of earrings. You see that? The beauty of art. Yeah. All right, Carlos, sketching or no sketching, or both?
I only sketch legs for furniture because I need to because I have to, and because I follow. There's a little bit of mathematics here too, in the sense that some of the lines, like if you were to put a square here, all these points are the same line, and so I have to do the sketch. I basically make the drawings on my work table. everything else I pretty much create as I go, except larger scale work, which you're gonna have to sketch it out because of the sheer size of it.
And you do have, if you go down to Carlos at the very back corner, there's another one, those two guys, we gotta keep them in the corner. But if you go down to the very end and you walk out, you'll see, how big is that? Like a 16
That's
foot?
about 15 by 8. Yes. So yeah, in that case I had to figure it out right, before I started doing it. I basically make a drawing on the floor in my studio. That kind of piece needs, you need to figure out before you get started in the actual, physical creation of it. But most of my work, I work with forms and shapes, and I kind of visualize what will work best, and that's the way I create it.
And Sherry, drawing? No drawing?
Yes, on the wall sculptures, I usually sketch them out life-size. I'll even go so far as to making them in paper first, so I don't commit the metal until it's time. The weavings, I sort of create them as I go. They do have a bit of a mind of their own, which is fascinating to me. And then I love the fact that we all fabricate our own products, our own art. Like Elizabeth's jewelry is all fabricated by herself. She doesn't buy settings and set stones in them. This is all done from just a sheet of metal. So we all sort of start with a sheet of metal and go from there. And some of us draw it, and some of us have it in our heads, but we figure it out as we're going along.
I love that. So I want to say something. My wife right here has a pair of Elizabeth's earrings on. Garland, stand up so everybody can see those. Unbelievable metalwork.
I think there's several people in the audience.
And Sherry, yeah.
Lady's got them on.
Yeah.
Gail has them on.
Yeah, see?
Yeah.
Good stuff, good stuff. I wish I was a jeweler, I'm not kidding. I always thought as I got farther along in my career that I would be doing smaller things, and that is not what has happened. So drawing, talking about drawings. I have several different bodies of work, I would say. I do a lot of commissions, so I do a lot of gates and doors, fire screens, very precise things. So yes, I do 2-scale drawings of those. And it's, when I'm designing those personal pieces that I want to design them that's going to reflect people's interest. It's going to reflect an architectural style of a home. It's going to reflect a geographical location. So those are the elements that I do in those drawings. That way, it's a one-up. Nobody down the street's going to have it. Nobody across the country's going to have it. So I do that. Free-form pieces, no. As I said, they've got a mind of their own. I know what I want it to finish at, usually height-wise, or I want to try. And so it seems like I work towards that. I want to, so we're talking about manipulating some steel and what we do. I'm talking about twisting by hand. So I do all these very vertical pieces. But if you look out here in the courtyard on that green strip there's a horizontal piece. Now that was a departure for me. That was, I wanted to do something horizontal. And those pieces are the biggest pieces that I can physically bend by hand. Those pieces, they're about 16 feet now. They started out as 20-footers. Now, I have a group of friends, lots of metal artists and blacksmith guys, and there's something about guys twisting steel. And so if I'm going to fire up and do a big piece, they want to be involved. And so come over and we all fire up and start twisting this, and then it's beer and pizza when it's over with. So.
That sounds fun. And when he needs to chill out a little bit, he's got a giant teeter-totter on property, right?
Biggest teeter-totter in the world.
You ever want to see grown men laugh? Put them on a teeter-totter. So you really touched on something that was going to be my next topic, which is evolution. Like, I think you're joking that you wanted to go small because you've gotten much larger.
Yeah, you know, and I do joke about that. It's part of, I think as an artist, all of us here, you have a vision. You have a vision on these things. I think, and everybody is inspired. Different things, different shapes, different elements can inspire you. And so sometimes it's monumental. Sometimes my hands won't work to do jewelry. I actually would love to do jewelry because jewelry is sculpture. It's amazing. But I think it's where that inspiration comes from. I know, so from some of my really tall vertical pieces, you get so much movement in the wind that it's part of that elasticity of the steel, and even sometimes when they're moving, they will touch, and you get this beautiful hollow clang. I don't claim to be making a wind chime. It's just one of those things that happens. It was never planned.
Before we move on from you, how do you get your color versus Sherry's using chemical to create the blues and the greens, and Sherry's now using the enamel, which is super cool. So you have texture and color on many of your different things. What techniques are you using?
Right. That's great. You know, I gotta drop back just for a second. That talking about evolution in art and all of us, all of your work changes. I went for a lot of years that if it wasn't raw hammered steel, it wasn't anything. And I found that I was putting a lot of barriers, perimeters on myself, keeping me from moving my art forward. So it's one of those things I really started experimenting. So my color is all enamel. It is automotive and aircraft enamel that is baked on there. Now, a lot of people will come up and ask me, oh, is this powder coated? It is not powder coated. I am not a powder coating fan at all. I love steel. Powder coating turns steel to plastic. That's my opinion. Yes, ma'am.
Explain what powder coating means.
Sure. So how many people have heard the term powder coating? Yeah, and especially involved with steel, right? So powder coating is actually, it's an epoxy powder that is melted onto steel. And what the reason I don't like it is, first of all, is the plastic. The second reason is because if you have a chip or a repair on that, they have to start over. They have to sandblast the whole thing and start over. And there's always rub marks. There's always little chips if you move something anywhere. So on my work, it's actually treated just like a car body. You can feather it down and touch it up. It's that simple. Does that answer?
Yeah, you might have touched on it earlier too, but the metal that's not colored, you've got different textures. Is that just grinding?
That's all grinding. So it's interesting. So if you look at Carlos's here, and Carlos has got two separate techniques here. So you can see all this is brushed. This all started off as carbon steel. And so he has taken that off. You know, it's through the heating and through the polishing. You see the different textures in this? It's the same thing. So this, I'm a balance guy. So when I talk about balance, I'm always going to be talking about odd numbers. So you'll see there's seven reeds in here. And so there's 4 colored ones, 2 different shades of red, and then the 2 textured and 1 carbon. So this carbon is actually the natural color of the steel. I just polished it and clear coated that. But all of these started out as this. So I've taken that carbon off to get to here and then added more texture to that.
How do you get the color?
The color. So that's that enamel. It's an automotive enamel that is baked on there.
After the last twist.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, it is after it's twisted because of the heating. So after you heat these pieces, you know, they're finely polished right now. Just look, Carlos is this way, and it's all about being able to touch them. Carlos does a magnificent job on his work, especially if you look at some of his wall pieces, that he's taken metal away, so and then polished that up, and it just gives it. I mean, I love that. I love where you have this mass and you can touch it. It's good, and it's a difference that you'll see in a lot of metal work. It is that final polish. So that's what this is, and then I actually this is assembled after it is painted
By welding.
By welding. And I'm an old welder. I was a nuclear certified welder for the U.S. government in the mid 70s, and so I still follow all those codes. That's heated, and you know, an old welder never dies. They just blow up.
84 up you go.
So Sherry, I've watched your work evolve, and it's sometimes hard to evolve because you've done things that people identify with you and you want to grow. So sometimes you still have homage to the old styles, but you definitely, what happens? You just think, I gotta try something different.
It's a transition, I think, and you can't keep doing the same thing over and over again. Anyway, I can't. So I think art does evolve. As far as the weavings go, I started many years ago in textile arts, and I used to be a weaver and had a big loom, spun my own yarn and naturally dyed it. China came to town with rugs and I had to stop. But I was just doing little weavings that were centerpieces for some of the wall sculptures, and I actually took another artist here to say, Sherry, why don't you do some big weavings? I go, why don't I? What a great idea. So that's the result of that conversation. And I do think art evolves. I also used to work in steel like these guys. I'm a welder, and I was starting out by I didn't know anything about the tools. Tools were the biggest learning curve for me. And so I found a welding class, and they were all trying to get certified to build nuclear submarines or bridges or whatever. I just wanted to do a sculptural piece, and they kind of patted me on the shoulder and humored me through it. And then I found a welding class for sculpture where I learned how to work with all of the tools that are involved. And when I came home and told my husband I wanted a welder for Christmas, he was so excited. He couldn't wait. So we call it garage jewelry now, all my tools. So, and then, yeah, we do too. We burnish the copper with a grinder like Michael and Carlos does. And I think what it does is it catches the highs and lows in the light and creates more interest, and again, movement. It all comes to movement. Even though it's a static material, it's that perceived movement. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, thanks.
Carlos? I've not known you as long as some on that end, but I've watched you evolve too. And where did you started off apprenticing for an artist in San Francisco? How and when did you like really come into your own style, and how has that grown?
That would be a while after my apprenticeship in San Francisco. I went to school in New York, and this was the year 2000. When, well, in 99, I kind of was at the point where I started taking sculpture classes at Hunter College in the city, and started creating my own work, which then I started showing around New York. And basically, I was fortunate that I started selling right away. So I graduated from school later in life, but nonetheless, in January 2001, and in February, I opened a studio in Hoboken, which I kept for 15 years. So this being my 8th season here, I've been creating my work for almost 20 years now, and showing it pretty much from coast to coast. Amazing experience that made me learn a lot about this incredible country. And so very, very thankful for it all. But it started around 99, 2000 when I had access to my to a studio at Hunter College in the city, and I kind of went on my own then.
Very good. So the time that you probably wish your jewelers is when you're loading and unloading, installing. Michael had a beautiful purple swirl that had to be installed yesterday. And the day before, I'm like, Michael, do you really have to do that tomorrow at 8? It's going to be pouring rain. And he's like, oh yeah, yep, gotta go. And he wrangled up some friends. I think that cost you some breakfast.
Big time, yes.
Big time, but they installed a piece up in the snow in Desert Mountain yesterday morning. So yeah, these guys are very hardy, and so are the girls. But definitely not for the faint of heart. And Elizabeth, I love your story of being a dropout, and you found your way though, and that I think is a really important message for people to understand that when you have a passion and a gift, you're going to find your way there.
For sure. I was thinking about this. I was very honored to be asked to join the panel, and I was thinking about what I was going to say, and I just forgot. You said, find your way, passion. And I was thinking I should mention that for a while, before I dropped out of college, I was a philosophy major. Who was a philosophy major? And also a very kind of introspective person that would think about things. What does this mean? And I thought for many years, what is the meaning of life? I figured out the meaning of life. The meaning of life is find what you're passionate about and share it with other people. That's the meaning of life. And I get to do that at this show with the people who work here and all the artists here. And what a gift that is, to be surrounded by people who are living out their passion, sharing it with others.
Amen, sister. I love that.
So I was supposed to actually talk about something else, which was not the color. No, we're not doing the coloring anymore. I forgot. What was he just talking about?
Evolution.
Evolution. That's it.
Yeah. We are a tribe here. We all forget. Yeah, evolution.
Yeah. So I have that. I've been diagnosed with the ADD thing, so I forget what I'm doing, or I have a million ideas, so I definitely have changed. And my jewelry has changed completely, probably about 5 times. I've been making jewelry for a living since 2001, and but making jewelry for 26 years is totally different. And I think I could point to certain little things, like one little round thing I made that led to all these different designs. And I picked up a washer off the ground, and I had it on my bench for over a year. And I was so busy making other things and shows and creating the work that I was working on that I never took the time to use it. And I did all cast work at that point, lost wax casting, so you make things in wax and then cast them. And I was like, you know, it's down season. I'm gonna make something with this washer that's been sitting here for a year. And I fabricated the piece, which is cutting metal parts and soldering it together, which I didn't do at that time. And I loved it so much, I quit doing casting and I moved to fabrication. So that was a huge change. But yeah, it does one thing kind of leads to another, and you think it's kind of gradual, but when other people see your work, they haven't seen it for a while, it's like a little kid growing up. Wow, they're really different now. You know, it's pretty cool.
Excellent. Very important that you evolve. So it's always fun to have our guests ask questions so we can make sure that we've gotten what they want covered. So anybody want, Adolfo? I'm going to repeat the question for those of you who couldn't hear and for Facebook. Elizabeth, do you ever see yourself creating large-scale pieces for the wall? You sculptor, you.
Yes. this is the funny thing. After being so snobby about like, oh, jewelry's not art, I have, since I started making jewelry, I've only made one piece that wasn't jewelry in all this time. And I'm interested in it. I just haven't gotten there yet. So a few years ago, this is my 4th year, a few years ago, I was in my booth, and this man was like, do you sell the picture on the wall? I'm like, well, it's a picture of jewelry. I sell the jewelry, and that's just a picture of it. And he's like, no, like, I like the way it looks on the wall. And I was like, and I looked at the picture, and I looked at him, and I looked at the picture, and I was like, that's a good idea. And I want to do it, but I have to do like these guys and figure out tools, and I definitely want to do larger scale stuff that just looks like my designs, but not on your body and up on the wall.
Cool. Please still make wearable art for those of us who like it. Okay, thank you. Yeah, okay, Wendy?
I have a question about the weaving. I have a question about the weaving, and I'm fascinated sitting here because it must be the angle that I'm sitting at, but I'm getting incredible texture coming out of that. But my question relates to your technique in doing it. Is there a base underneath that you're doing it? Do you do it all at once? You know, in terms of, is it in pieces or just, it's just how are you doing it?
Okay, yeah, I actually work flat. Having been a weaver and worked on a loom, I had a good base to draw on for weaving the copper. So what I do first is I take raw copper and I patina it with the chemicals. So I know this one combination of chemicals is going to turn the copper green, but I don't know all the interesting things that are going to happen with it at the same time. So once I get the 2 sheets of copper patinaed or oxidized, and I try and do different colors so you have some contrast so you can really see the weave. And then I start out with these flat sheets, and my husband, my partner, builds the wooden cradle that they're mounted on. So I lay the cradle down, and then I cut all of the warp pieces and leave them attached at the top. So it's just a big thing of fringe, basically. And I wrap it over the top, and then I just cut one strip at a time on the other sheet and weave them through until I get all the way down to the bottom. And then they're wrapped around, they're an adhesive, and then they're wrapped around and stapled on the back, and then they're sealed in a clear coat. So copper being the volatile material that it is, clear coating is really, really important when you're looking at copper work. So, and again, it goes back to this piece will live longer than me, probably, so, yeah. So did I answer your question?
So the vertical is called the warp?
Yes, and this is the weft. Warp and weft.
How many of you do that? Oh, you're smarter
Yay,
than I am.
weavers! Quilters and weavers.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know, all of you come from places where there's a long heritage of Native peoples. How did that into the arts of Native peoples influence your work in any way?
Can you repeat that question, Michael?
Okay, yeah. I think you said where how were you inspired by early Native people and where? Is that? My home studio is in Montana, and so we still there's a lot of reservations in Montana. I'm in northwest Montana, up near Glacier National Park. So there's the Flathead Reservation is there. I picked up my first arrowhead when I was 7, and so I've been infatuated with these ancient cultures. So I became very knowledgeable. I wanted to learn. So I picked up every book that I could, and I traveled everywhere that I could to meet these different people. And I attend an International Plains Indian Seminar annually in Cody, Wyoming, at the Buffalo Cody Museum. So you get to meet a lot of really wonderful native people. Well, as you research and start doing prehistoric pieces, it kind of comes down to tribal affiliation and geographical locations, because a lot of those tribes have moved and have been transported other places. So when you're looking at prehistoric art, you're looking at who inhabited that during that period of time. And it's pretty well, there's a lot of things that have been researched to that, so it's knowledgeable. My main influence is actually Crow, the Crow people who are in central Montana. And it's just the simplicity and the geometrics that I'm amazed at. And so that's where that, I hope that, does that answer that question?
Anyone else want to talk about that? So Michael knows where some awesome petroglyphs are, and we went out on Flathead Lake and he took us to a place that you can only get to by boat. It was very exciting. So that's a good question. And I think all of us, whether we're artists or not, we're all influenced by those who came before us, whether we think about it or not. I mean, that's just part of our life. So especially in art, you can't help but express that many times. So anyone else have some? Anne?
I noticed how much you admire and appreciate and understand each other's work. Tell us about how you guys work with each other as opposed to
Oh, good question. How do they learn from each other? Because they admire each other and appreciate it. How does this experience help you incubate? Learn from each other, and how do you influence each other, and what has that done for your art?
Well, I think ultimately comes down to it is, or to begin with, is respect. In this case, with Michael and I, here, I respect what he does. I had the opportunity to visit in Montana his studio, and he's the real thing. He has so many facets to beyond what he does with steel that are great about. And then the work itself, he's an original, and he's doing his own thing, and his own vision, and I that's enough. That's plenty for me.
How about you, Lisbon? How is being here and interacting with the others influence?
I'm sorry, I mentioned Mike, I didn't mention you guys, but it applies, in different ways, but basically, like, it's respect for a vision that we bring to, with us.
I think it goes back to what I was talking about, passion and being so grateful to be around here. It's not maybe a certain technique that you see someone else doing or a certain shape or design, but it's just that you're watching them create things and having that mutual respect, which is inspiring to yourself, because you're like, yeah, they're doing their thing, I'm doing my thing, and it does create this really special energy and feeling, which I noticed the first year I was here too. You don't go to shows like this because it's almost like an artist residency, because we're actually here working, and you see people starting something, finishing it, and it's different, it's special.
I think it's really great the way we can support each other. And yes, we're competitors, but there's a great camaraderie that happens here with the artists, and I've always appreciated that. I know a lot of the patinas that I do are also done on bronze, and so I will talk to the bronze artists about this chemical or that chemical and what works, or what do they know about it. And most of us are very generous in sharing our information and coming up with or bouncing ideas off. Like, I'll have a design and I'll say, hey, what do you think of this? Should it be a little bit bigger or smaller? Does this work? So, it's just that camaraderie. And this is a unique show in that we are all working in our craft, And so we get to see the processes and share ideas. And I just love that about this show.
Actually, I remembered something too, that someone mentioned, like, before. You know, you don't think that you maybe are like, oh, I'm going to do something like that. But I actually was inspired by Sherry's, just being around her pieces. Remember, like last year, I did the weaving piece. Remember that?
I do, yeah, it's great.
And like I had used to do, when I was doing casting, doing this weft and warp and weft, like wire weavings, small jewelry style. And I hadn't done it in years, but just being around her work and seeing it, it was like, oh, I want to make one like that, small scale and in silver. So she inspired me to do that last year.
Yeah, and I think also we have, we share. I remember one time, Michael, before you started bringing your welders down here, I had a welder and we had a piece that he needed to work on, and I said, come over to my house. We don't always have all of our tools here because sparks are flying and acid is spilling, and you know, it gets a little scary. And I've got goggles and masks and lab coats and rubber boots on, but we, yeah, I'll share my welder with any welder who wants to come over and use it, or the plasma cutter, which I know you like.
You know, one of the things, and I think everybody here probably realizes this, that this is so much more than an art show. This is a community, and it's a community of artists, and it's a community of collectors, and it's like nothing else that exists. And I mean, we as artists feel honored to be here. The camaraderie, the respect, as everybody has said, is what it really is about.
And it's really fun. We have so many artists that will have collectors, and they'll go out to their home and they'll see a spot and they'll say, oh, I know just the piece or just the artist that you need to talk to who could provide something for you. What do you have there?
I just thought everybody might want to see this. This is a leg, right?
Well, what's that?
What is
thing?
that? Where'd that come from? Carlos?
Back in my corner.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
I don't know.
Well,
it hasn't been ground
it's,
yet.
but
I was
this
going to
is,
say, you can comfortably sit on this stool and never snag anything. That
right.
hasn't
So
been
this is a leg I'm working on for a, it's gonna look like that once I'm done with it. But thanks, Lisa. So here, you see, this is the out of the angle iron, and it was straight at one point, and I tapered it, and then I'm working. So these are all the marks of the different bendings I need to plug to the steel in order to shape it this way. So this is about halfway done. The next coat.
That's really cool. And maybe not today or tomorrow, but he is welding and fabricating the legs.
Here.
But
yeah.
there always are warm spots in the tent, and they usually revolve around torches. The glass guys,
Yeah.
you outside. Yeah. But yeah.
Well, so far,
He's trying to make all four almost exactly the same.
Yep.
Right here.
yeah. So you see, like if you went to my studio, you'll see that 4 of them are at this point. And that's the only way for me to make them kind of the same.
So you're
I can stack them
consistently
up.
applying the heat and the curving
Right.
to
So
go
basically,
on all 4.
basically, I bring this to a red hot point all across, but because the curves have length, I have to hit it more than once. So often, in this case, it's about 3 times per curve. So it's basically I heat it up until it's red hot, then I pull or push depending on the way the curve is going. And because there is a lot of displacement of steel, this elbows out, so I have to immediately turn around to the anvil and hammer it to soften the curve.
So just like Michael had that vertical piece that started at 20 feet, ended up 16, how long
Yes.
was this before you?
Right. I have to allow for some shrinkers. Yes.
Well, something that I don't know if it makes sense, but not only is the curves and texture in there, but it is tapered as well.
Yeah.
I happen to own one of Carlos's tables, benches like this myself. So I've looked it over. It's good stuff.
Thank you, Michael.
Yes, and many of these people collect each other. That's the other thing. You go to any of their houses, you'll see a lot of art from the other artists. So, okay, I think we are about 1 minute left. I can tell by the temperature. Wendy?
This is a question that has been building for weeks. Every week we have a number of artists come and they bring a sample of their work, which is awesome. We also know when we walk around, we see that they have lots of examples of what they do. What I've been thinking about was how, and I can understand some of the parameters here, but I look at different things that the artists bring themselves to show. How do you select that individual piece out of all that you could show us to be the one that you bring to the show to talk about?
Yeah. Whatever you can carry?
Yeah, that's valid. Don't think that isn't valid, because it is. I think for me personally, I'm always excited about the newest piece I've done. I think that's a natural thing, because maybe you're doing something a little bit different. So I'm always in the last piece that came off my table before I head for this show, and this is not it. But it is in my studio, so it's 3 times that size, and you can see it. So for me, I think that's part of. I think there's generations in work. It is true for me. I think it's part of our evolution of that.
I think that's true. The last thing you make, you always think is I love all my children, but kind of sometimes the last one you do is your favorite at that moment, and that favorite changes all the time. There are some pieces that are my favorite for years, and I just love them. But what I decided to bring here was something I could lift and carry, and that I could put on that easel. So it wasn't, necessarily the piece I wanted you to see the most. It was, hopefully you'll come to all of our booths, our studios, and see the scope of our work, and not just these 3 or 4 pieces here.
I am wearing my latest piece.
I've been noticing that.
It's not finished yet. I wanted to finish it, but it's not finished, so I'm just still wearing it anyway.
And I guess I kind of went with something that I consider a signature piece for me, and so that's why I brought this one over. I thought it was, and especially with the theme tonight, or this afternoon, that about manipulation of steel. I think that all of these pieces we brought show that.
So that's a perfect segue into telling you where everyone is located. So Michael Jones, you'll notice, has work in the courtyard, and he's just to the right of all the courtyard art you see. So at the far end of the south tent, toward Hayden Road. Sherry is conveniently right across from our warm beverage station, right there. Sherry and Ralph Belgram's spot is right there. And Elizabeth, if you go to where the check-in desk is and go left to the end and take a left, she's right around the corner there. And Carlos is at the far end of the north tent by the Hayden Road side, the mountainside. So we do hope that you'll take some time to explore their studios and their other work, and we thank you all for being here, and great thanks to our awesome panel.